I'd like to talk to you about autism myths and misconceptions and why they matter. So, why do we have misconceptions about autism? Autism is new to society. It was discovered in the 1940s, but it wasn't thought to be very prevalent, only about 1 in every 1,000 or 2,000 people, until the 1990s when we started to update our diagnostics and realized that it was much more prevalent. Current prevalence rates show it's about 1 per every 60 children. News and media focus mostly on children who tend to have different needs than adults with autism. Symptoms and behaviors are pretty much kind of generalized in the media to the whole population of people with autism. So you tend to see either the high functioning or the really severe cases of autism. Media portrayal isn't much better. It usually only represents 2 types, kind of the male savant, like in Good Doctor and Rain Man, or the male kind of quirky, annoying character, like in Atypical and Big Bang Theory. Technically, they say that Sheldon is not autistic, but he displays a lot of the autistic behaviors. And so he's kind of unofficially an autism character. So what are some common misconceptions? So here I've listed just a few. Obviously there are more than these, but these are some of the common ones. Autistics don't want social relationships. This is not true. Most autistics do want relationships, but socializing can be difficult and draining. Autistics don't like to be touched. While this can be true, some have sensory avoidance to touch, others need hugs and sensory input, some are in between. Myself, I didn't like touch very much when I was a child. Now that I'm older, I'm okay with hugs and that kind of thing, but it sort of depends on the situation and how I'm feeling that day. Autistics don't feel empathy. This is the one that I hear a lot. I actually had my professor the other day say this in class like it was a fact and kind of threw me for a loop. So it's still out there. Autistics do have emotions and we do feel empathy. Some of us have difficulty recognizing emotions in ourselves and other people, and some of us have too much empathy. So you may have someone who feels too much, so they try to just shut it down and try not to be very emotional because it can be so overwhelming. Another one, autistics don't notice social rejection. This is definitely not true. Autistics do notice rejection, and it often affects their mental health over time. A lot of the reasons why people believe this and have believed this is because a lot of times the lack of eye contact and how we can tend to seem like we're in our own world and aren't really paying attention, when in fact the opposite is true, that we really are paying attention and we do hear what's going on and notice what's going on around us. All autistics are intellectually impaired. I haven't heard this one as much. I found it cited on a couple sites, so this is a misconception, so I thought I'd throw it in here. So there are about 38% of autistics have some sort of intellectual disability, but they're separate things. You can have autism with Down syndrome. You can have autism with a lot of other disabilities and issues. So autism and intellectual disability are separate things, and you can have both. And it is more common for autistics to have intellectual disability than the general population, but not all people with autism have an intellectual disability. Vaccines cause autism. No, 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 and no. Vaccines do not cause autism. Say it with me. The original study that showed a link was discredited. It's been retracted. The author has even said that it was completely bogus and made up and has no basis in reality. And sadly, it persists to this day. One reason that this, got associated with autism is because for some forms of autism, the regression form, children develop normally until they get about to the age of 2 or 3. And then they have what's called a regression, where they'll suddenly stop speaking or kind of what's seen as retreating into themselves, or they have more sensory issues, which is about the same time that you start getting a lot of vaccines. And so that has perpetuated the myth, even though there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of studies that have shown that there's no correlation. Autism is a disease and can be cured. So autism is not a disease. It is a neurological difference. And there have been calls for cures in the past by parents mostly. But by and large, in the autistic community, people with autism do not want a cure. There's really no scientific basis for finding a cure because it's not a disease. It's how our brain works. So short of figuring out how to rewire an entire brain, it's not really a cure. And most people with autism like how their brain works. Yes, we have difficulties fitting into the society, but that's not really because of autism. That's just because of how our society functions. Autistics need training and therapy in order to function in society. So this is partially true. Some autistics do need help to find jobs, live independently. It really depends on the severity of each person. But society also has an obligation to be inclusive and accepting, and it shouldn't all be put upon the autistic person to fit in or change themselves to be more like the norm. And this is why you're taking this class, because you believe this as well, and you're trying to make a more inclusive workplace. Thank you. You can always tell if someone is autistic. No. Autism is a spectrum, which means there's a wide variety of how it can present in people, how it can look to people on the outside, and it's often called a hidden disability just because it is hidden. It's inside us. It's not something you can see on the surface. And a lot of autistic people mask their attributes that may give them away to try to fit in and be normal. And this comes at a cost to us that do that. I mask a lot. And it's very draining. You get home at the end of the day, you just want to curl up and go to sleep. But there's lots of other stuff to do. So yes. And it's never okay to diagnose someone and tell someone, hey, I think you're autistic. It is okay to say, seems like you're having a difficulty over here. Is there something I could help you? Or are there ways that I could help you? That's fine. Autistic employees require a lot of support and accommodations. This is generally not true. It depends on the person. Some people need no accommodations. If accommodations are needed, they're mostly simple to do. They're low cost. It's stuff like, letting us listen to music, having noise canceling headphones to block out sound, that kind of thing. Autistic employers are only good at very detailed or repetitive tasks. This is one that's often portrayed in the media a lot. A lot of the articles and stuff you'll find about employing people with autism are like, oh, they're so good at detailed things and they're so good at repetitive tasks, and which they are. They are good at those things, depending on the person. Sometimes I enjoy repetitive tasks because it is nice to just kind of not have to worry too much, but I don't want to do that all day. Nobody really wants to do that all day. But what autistic people do tend to be is very honest, hardworking, and loyal, And those are the qualities that you really want in an employee. So why do these misconceptions matter in the workplace? Hopefully you've guessed at this. But misconceptions and stereotypes can cause people to avoid and isolate autistic employees and other people in society. Misconceptions can lead to misunderstandings and false perceptions. For example, that autistic employees are lazy or defiant or rude, when maybe you just simply don't understand where they're coming from. Or, one of the ones that I struggle with is if I'm walking down the hall and I see somebody, but they don't notice me and they're not paying attention. So I don't feel like I should say hi because I don't want to startle them because they don't obviously see me. And then I get up to them or I just pass them and they're like, well, hi. And they seem offended that I didn't say hi to them, but I didn't, they were focusing on other things. And so they think I'm rude because I didn't say hi. But in my head, I'm for the whole time walking past them, trying to figure out what I should do. So it's not I just don't understand some of these social things, what's appropriate and what's not. And so sometimes I come across as rude when that's really not what I'm trying to do. And so that's a really simple explanation of it. But so learning to understand and your own misperceptions and clarifying those leads to increased empathy and acceptance among your staff. It increases, and that increase in acceptance and empathy is really felt by all your staff and increases their happiness and the productivity of all your employees. So thank you. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.